CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Today, we're going to meet Lou Adler. He is the CEO of Performance-Based Hiring Learning Systems. Performance-based hiring helps companies build exceptional teams by focusing on candidates' ability to deliver key performance outcomes rather than merely matching skills to job descriptions. Lou, welcome to CMMS Radio.
Hey, Greg, thank you very much. And Greg, that was an awesome introduction, or you got it, because I didn't feed you those words, but those were good.
Well, what I tend to do, a lot of people know me for just kind of hit and record, grip it and rip it, low prep, no prep. But I want to know a little bit about who I'm bringing on and why it matters. And some might even say, well, why are you having Lou on CMMS Radio? You're supposed to be talking about CMMS software. Well, I do that a lot, but I'm also much more interested in the maintenance management in the middle. That's people and process. And there's all these things that happen. It's 2025. We talk about the skilled trades gap and, manufacturing's being reshored. Well, guess what? We've got 400,000 job openings right now that we can't even fill. And now we're going to reshore, and that's going to exponentially become a greater gap. And you also happen to have some, what I find fascinating experience way back when it comes to being involved in OEM manufacturing in automotive. That means that you've seen a lot over these years with people and process, skills matching, all these types of things. And I'm interested in that kind of a story because I think it makes sense. I don't know if I'm right, but I don't really care either.
If I tell a few stories, you'll be fine and happy. So yeah, interesting. Although I'm a recruiter now, well, I'm not really a recruiter anymore. I've got a company that trains companies on how to hire people. But I'm going to go back to give you the quick link, and we can go back or forward where we want, to 1977. In 1977, I was 31 years old, running a manufacturing company making automotive accessories. And I actually really liked the job. 300 people reporting to me, actually really did like the job. Hated the group president, hated him. In fact, I wouldn't let him in my facility, and I quit 4 times a year every time he showed up. I said, if you show up, I'm leaving. And it was for a big company, and I didn't like the corporate politics, but my background is in manufacturing, material control, planning, cost accounting, financial budgeting and planning. I'm being at big companies, aerospace, high-tech, consumer electronics, and automotive back in Detroit, and also automotive accessories. So I had all this background. When I got into recruiting, I literally quit 4 times in 1977. I ultimately did it in January or July of that year, gave him 6 months notice, became a recruiter on July 2nd, 1978. And even with my first assignment, I realized that hiring was broken. And I said, I think after a year or so, I said, I think I can make this a pretty good business process by focusing on yield, maintenance, not screwing up, controlling scrap, controlling wasted time. And that eventually became performance-based hiring. So in a nutshell, that whole background in engineering, manufacturing, process, maintenance, and I'll give you a good maintenance story in a moment here, but that's actually evolved into, hey, it's a business process. Apply the same kind of manufacturing and business planning skills to it, you'll actually get the right results. And it's been an uphill battle since, but it still works.
Yeah. Well, and a battle worth fighting, and these are the kind of things that not only fascinate me, but I think they make a difference for the industry, because even if one person kind of understands or learns something from that story, then we've made some kind of an impact. And I think, a lot of what happens in these environments, like the situation you're describing, where certain leadership can come in and they're just not as attuned as they would want you to believe that they are to how things really work. They're doing what they do, and they're not necessarily helping. A lot of times they're screwing up the process. And whether that relates to hiring or not is one thing, but it's about how teams move well together, and hiring fits into that primarily because you got to get the right people to build the right culture to achieve that fundamental excellence that you're talking about when it comes to manufacturing or anything that's related to it. So I would love to hear that story you were teasing
So
about.
here's the story. So I was for a company, had 6 or 7 divisions selling automotive accessories. I then so I was direct at headquarters, but I said, I want to get into line operations, and a director of material job opened up. So I went in and I said, I want that job. And the company president, my boss said, no, you can't, you have no background. I said, okay, here's what I'll do. I'll take an APIX course. And if I ace it, you'll give me the job. So I knew in San Diego they had a 3-day course. I went down, took the course, aced it, became a director of materials 2 weeks later. Uh, and then I started looking at the job. And this was the interesting piece where I get into maintenance. I realized that we were starting to ship stamped metal products, and the tools kept on breaking down. So I said, this doesn't make any sense. Why do these tools keep on breaking down? And they said, well, they went through the whole thing, and I saw the stamping machines, and I said, no, I want to understand how often these tools break down. So I said, I want to take this machine down. And I'm 27, 28 at the time, really had no manufacturing background. But I actually told the VP operations, take the machine apart. I want to see what's going on here. And I saw the actual tool that made the stamping. I said, show me exactly on the tool where this part was breaking. And he showed me. I said, how often do they break down? He said, every 6 or 7 months. I said, do you have this plan? Why can't we just put a schedule together of when they break down? And rather than wait till they break down, let's rebuild them 2 months before that. And we did that. We took every single tool, 200-300 tools. I created a schedule of every single one of those tools when they're going to break down, and we solved the problem. But the VP operations, who wasn't my boss, who kind of had he said, you can't do this. I said, watch me do it. I said, and if you don't want to do it, you'll be fired in a week. He said, you can't fire me. And I really couldn't. I went to the president of the corporation and said, get rid of this guy. He's a useless piece of shit. That's why we're costing so much money. He was fired a week later. I then became the VP operations. I then became the general manager of that division of the president. That's when I started, I was 29 years old and running this company. And then this group president told me how to do it better. I said, leave me alone. I'll figure it out. So, but the idea is, when you understand root cause analysis, it doesn't matter what it is. You start breaking it down and say, I want to understand what's going on here. And I had my suit on, and I told him I'm taking this part. I want to understand exactly how this machine works. And it was pretty cool. I mean, I got that idea. I'm trying to think. Ayn Rand wrote a book. And I can't remember the name of the book, but Ayn Rand wrote a book, and I read it when I was 22 in college or something. And some guy in manufacturing did that. I said, I'm going to try that if I ever get to, and I did it. And it worked. I couldn't believe it. And everyone's shocked that this kid could go in there and do it. But I just said, I'm going to do it. And it worked. So
I love it.
Story. It was fun. And I did learn a lot from it.
See, so now everybody knows why you're on CMMS radio. That right there is the story that people need to hear. That right there is the story that people have. That right there is the story of how maintenance and reliability actually works. And that
no question
is there is literally nothing more that would need to be said about that experience, how it lends to the credibility. And I'm really curious, how on earth were you so inspired to be that way at the tender age of 29 and have that kind of moxie, because you knew what you knew, yet you left enough room for what you didn't know. You're like, we have to take this apart. I have to see what's going on. I have to find out if there's a defect I can eliminate or something like this, or use maintenance to increase our throughput. I mean, it's a beautiful story.
Well, here's the issue. So I do have a mechanical engineering degree. And I remember when I was 18, the first class I took, and I think professors do this, they showed me a bridge. I was going to school upstate New York. They showed me, the guy shows a picture of a bridge. And it wasn't a big bridge, over maybe a 50-foot stream or something. Maybe it was even 100-foot. So I'm not positive of. But it showed the bridge being built on both sides, and it was coming together in the middle. And it had and this was in 1965 or 64. So it was my first engineering design class, and they kept on showing the pictures coming together. And so it was a series of pictures. When they finally got to the end picture, the bridge was off 6 inches, one side from the other, because they built it from side to side, coming together. And the professor said, in this class, you'll be sure this never happens to you. But what it was a tolerance stack problem of going from east to west. They were plus whatever it is, plus or minus. You had all the stack up of all the bridge building parts, and going from west to east, it was 3 - 3 inches. But that put them all 6 inches apart. And it was just a fascinating story that when in engineering, you got to make sure it's right. You can't play with it, and you got to track tolerances. You got to track maintenance. You got to understand what's going on. So it's almost the thinking process you have to have of, hey, we're designing something that works. Let's understand where it could break down. Let's dig into it. Let's see if we can control those pieces to understand how to make it better and improve the processes at lowest cost and highest yield.
Amazing. And a question about that then, when it comes to these concepts of planning and scheduling and resource allocations, in maintenance, one of the things we're always primarily concerned with are those failures and disruptions. And there's this concept of, like predictive maintenance, or being able to see when those failures are going to take place. The critical component is in the actual planning first, so that you spend enough time and diligence to establish what you could possibly know. You're not going to be able to think of every variable. But what do you think is the bigger mistake in environments where they don't do that? They get to work a little bit too quickly or something like that. You got anything on that?
Well, here, let me kind of go into, I'm going to say it's the 90s, because that's the last time I actually walked into a manufacturing facility. So I did a lot of work in the 90s with injection molding components. And this was in Six Sigma was really becoming the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend of mine who I had known from Rockwell Automotive, and he was president of a company making fasteners for the automotive industry. And I was in Chicago, and I said, Don, tell me about the Six Sigma. How do you do this? How do you do it? And I could see the injection, the SPC charts. I could see in the injection mold, I could see the little charts going up and down. So you could see the variance on different machines and pressure, the valve, whatever it was, you could see this stuff in real time. But when I went to this fastener company, he making millions of fasteners a day to put automotive parts together. And all of a sudden I said, how do you control for Six Sigma? This is going so fast. He said, here's a machine. And he just pointed out to one, and because he's looking around the factory, let's go over here. So he pointed out to one machine, and these fasteners are popping out of this machine like bullets. I mean, it was like a machine gun kind of pull it. And all of a sudden, it was like a loud noise, a bell, or I can't remember that, but it was a loud noise. And he said, let's go over here. So we looked over there, and there was a feed line coming down. And all of a sudden, something that was almost like a wall came in front of it. So all the parts that were built out of variance were shut off. All the parts shut off. So you could see this thing piling up, turn the machine off, and they weren't making broken parts anymore. He said, and he then told me, so what we're trying to do is predict when a tool is going to break down. He said, I now know that I can stop it at a bad part at this moment, 4 to 6 seconds before it happens, and we have that. But now I'm trying to track with all the machines, how far before did I know that tool was going to break down, which is very similar to me climbing into that stamping machine. You could start looking predictive analytics. Hey, we know this tool is going to break down at a certain point in time. It's got to maintenance. But if you start seeing the variance on the statistical process control starting to move up or down or going out of variance, hey, this thing's only got 3 more weeks of life or a week of life. We got to go in and rebuild the tool or rebuild that manufacturing process or whatever that tool is, the pressures, the valves, the numerical controlling, whatever it is. You got to it gives you forward-looking indicators that you got a problem here that you got to address before you build bad parts.
Yeah, and so and in the 90s, there was some technology, but it wasn't where we had, for example, sensor monitoring or anything like that quite yet, right? That was it was more of a human factor.
Well, I think in the statistic in injection molding, because they seem to have it because they're controlling the pressures of the plastic going in. And I remember talking because we did a lot of clients with that as a recruiter. They did seem to have a lot of pressure monitoring in injection molding. When I went to the stamping machine, it was like it was cruder. He put this wall up. He could see the part breaking down. Once the part was out of spec, they closed it down. But I suspect 20 years later, they probably are much more advanced than that as well. I mean, he still had a bunch of bad parts. He just weren't building bad parts. So
this is why I like these journey stories, and I want to switch it up now. So when it comes to what you're doing now and how that really came into, like, from that July 2nd date when you start focusing in on recruiting, and then it starts to become developing recruiters so that they have the right kind of viewpoints and skill sets, and they can apply those properly to get the right kind of people into the right situations, not just a pure skills match. How did it become what it is now, where it's much, much bigger, and there's kind of like this spread out effect, right? It's not just you, it's an entire team, and you set it up. How did that all come into existence, and who should be talking to you? Who should be reaching out?
Well, I don't right now. I retired a couple of years ago and I'm starting to rebuild it. AI kind of said, hey, this is a game changer. But if I really had to think about how it worked, if you think about scrap, I mean, that to me is this, you think about scrap, and I tell HR folks or recruiters when I train them in a class, I said, I want you guys to think you're a plant manager. Think like a plant manager. And I'm going to say, if you were making bad parts, this is about a hiring course, but if you were making bad parts and you know these parts are bad, would you continue making bad parts and only keep the good ones, or would you do something else? So this is my question to HR people. Very simple question. All of them said, no, we turn off the machine. I said, so now let's take that idea and apply it to hiring. When you send a candidate into a hiring manager, and the hiring manager says to you, do you have any more candidates? That's basically saying you got a scrap problem. He said, don't send in more candidates, figure out why the machine is broken. And the machine is you finding candidates, the recruiter, and the hiring manager interviewing. So there's got to be something broken there. So don't keep on making bad parts. And companies around the world make bad parts. So you look at it from that standpoint. So now I'm going to say in 1978, as a recruiter, I was running a company. I was making pretty decent money at 29 or 30 years old, running a company. It wasn't great. It was pretty good money. I was certainly, nobody would be embarrassed by it. I doubled my income that next year being a recruiter. And then I said, if I could double my income again if I get rid of the scrap. And I got rid of some of the scrap. And then I said, hey, now I got, because I got hiring managers to start thinking more aligned. Then I said, I think I could double it again if I get rid of some more scrap, getting candidates to accept jobs. So I just kept on saying, I'm going to get rid of the scrap. And after 3 or 4 years, I said, hey, it works. And then I started writing about it, saying, hey, you define work this way, interview this way, control scrap. You got a problem. Don't just keep on sending more candidates. Stop the scrap and figure out what the root cause is. So it's not any different than going into that machine and figure out why I was making bad parts and why the tool was breaking down every 7 or 8 months. So it's just that idea of root cause analysis, figure it out, and then fix it before you keep on going forward.
Is it fair to say, I've said this a lot, and maybe I thought I was right. I don't really know, but it seems like everything is essentially a production environment, whereby with taking those moments of pausation and actually doing root cause analysis, you can in fact find the opportunities to eliminate the waste, or the scrap, if you will, which is what all those things are all about, right?
No question. I mean, think about this, Greg. People apply to job postings online. I talked to somebody who said last year they had 80,000 people apply to all their jobs, 80,000, and they only hired 120 of those people.
Jeez.
I mean, I look at that as a huge scrap problem. Said, you let 80,000 people apply. What if you only let 1,000 people apply? Didn't let the people who shouldn't have qualified even apply. You've just solved the problem. You don't have to spend 99% of your money on dealing with candidates who shouldn't have applied. But HR people don't think that way. As a manufacturing person, I don't need 80,000 names to get 100 hires. You might need 1,000 names, but that solves, that's 1/10 the problem, or 1/20th the problem. But HR doesn't think it. I got to get more. I got to get 150,000 names to get. And then my hiring manager says, I need to see more people. I need to see more people. I need to see more people. No, the problem is you got the wrong candidates coming in the funnel. That's the
Yeah.
top of the funnel. Why are you buying crap material? Let's get higher, better material, and spend a little bit more money for the raw material, and you'll wind up with better candidates at the end.
Well, not to mention, what about the candidates that are like, why
Absolutely.
was I even in on this? I shouldn't have even been a consideration.
And they get pissed off, and then they write on LinkedIn, "Oh, I got a terrible experience," and then companies have to say, "Oh, we got to prevent the terrible experience called candidate experience. Make that better." The way you make it better is don't let bad people to apply to begin with. But again, this is manufacturing thinking that way is totally different. So yesterday I talked to a big company in Europe, and the guy was really smart. And I said, "God, Milan, you just seem so different." He said, "Yeah, I'm an industrial engineer." Uh, so he's thinking process,
Yeah.
step by step. Hey, let's do it right each step. I mean, it's when you think like that way, you come up with a different answer. HR people don't think that way in general. So now we have this problem. I mean, if you just think about the world of technology, every single function, whether it's yours in maintenance or distribution, I bought last night. So, example, last night I went out to clean my driveway off for the dogs. I have 2 dogs and I'm cleaning them up. And I always go and clean the driveway off afterwards. Well, the hose handle broke. So I went in last night, 10 o'clock, said, I got to buy a new hose thing off Amazon. It was there in the morning when I woke up. I mean, so you just look at this stuff and say, look what everybody in distribution, manufacturing, Six is doing. HR is still like in the Stone Age.
I wonder what that's all about. Is it, do you think the HR kind of, well, let's just say generally speaking, the commonality is that they think like that and they leave this opportunity on the table? Is it because of the way they're measured? Is it the metrics they're measured against or the KPIs that shapes their behaviors and makes them unwilling to do it better because they can't?
100%. They're just designed, their motivation is keep risk averse, don't make change, we don't want to get sued, let's control it. So people who grow in that environment have to adapt to that environment. So if you're more risk oriented and change oriented, you won't want to go into HR. But if you're comfortable in that environment, so now when you get to manager, director, vice president, your mindset is, no, I can't make change. I got to do it this way. So, and they don't embrace technology. They embrace it, but it's to make things more efficient, not make them redesign them.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I ask you a pretty, I don't know if it's controversial or not, but a really direct question about the reality of HR people? Well, I'll just ask it. Are HR people there to really protect and look out for the employees, or are they really there for the corporation?
Oh, I let's say this. I think many of them are there for the employee, but their first requirement is I got to protect the company. I got to protect the company. So whether they impersonally want to protect the employee, that's not what they're paid for. They're paid to keep the company out of trouble, do it the right way at the cheapest point in time. And because they've grown up that way, they might believe that, hey, I'm helping the person, but that's their second criteria. The first criteria is I got to help the company and protect the company from being sued.
Yeah. Yeah. And then like taking that and like not just HR, but overall with organizations themselves, is it fair to say that when corporations want to do really right by their clients, the market, the community, the people within, that it's more expensive to really kind of take good care of people, deliver really, really good products, and be one of those companies that is known for excellence? Are they just investing more and more, and they're willing to say, hey, that's a little less profit because we want to play the long game? Is that how it really boils down to the difference between these orgs?
No, I don't know that that's true. I think it's the idea that because of this HR mentality, and they're not necessarily bad people,
Mm-hmm.
they don't know how to make the financial business decision that you just defined. I have this other program called Moneyball for HR, where we really look at, hey, let's look at the cost of hiring good people, how we find these people. Maybe you do pay a premium for this person, but that person can produce more. It might be worth it. Just like when you look at 80,000 people applying to a job and only 120 probably only 300 to 400 of those people got interviewed. I said, so when you look at why are you spending all this time on this whole process? So if you can't put all those pieces together, and it's a moving puzzle. I mean, in manufacturing, I don't know what your experience is, Greg, but you're in a factory. Even that little factory I had stamping machines, molding machines, wrapping machines, distribution machines. I'm moving, and this is back in the 70s. There's a lot of moving parts. We were just starting to implement an MRP system at that time. Then you got to, how do you put all these pieces together? You got to just think about it. Then you got costing, then you got a budget. And I remember in that company, they controlled us for raw materials coming in our inventory. And I remember stopping a truck because if I brought this truck in, we were in Compton, California. If I brought the truck in, I would have gone over budget for my material purchase for the month. So I closed the gates on like 2 days before the end of the month, just so the truck. I have 4 trucks backed up there, and they're barking, and I couldn't let them in because I take heat from the president. I mean, I'm 28 years old and preventing trucks from coming in. I said, I can't do it. It was a stupid rule. I mean, what's 2 days? But at the end of the month, man, we would have had $300,000 or $400,000 of material that it wasn't in my monthly budget. So, I mean, that was a stupid thing, but it was a real thing. You just kind of, and I don't know that HR can balance all these competing objectives to the degree.
Yeah. Well, it would be a lot to ask anyway, and especially the bigger the organization. But what you were just talking about really reminded me of this idea that whether we're using technology or not, when we're in these production environments, manufacturing environments, dealing with materials, people, trucks, logistics, all of it, the better outcomes really come from people being involved and caring for what they're doing. And something seems to have happened over the last few decades, I think, where everyone's looking for easy buttons. Everyone's doing this set it and forget it type approach to the things, whether they use, like I say, technology or not. But with what they do, you can't not manage the things. You have to maintain it. You have to go back and revisit it on a regular frequency. And I think that has kind of gone away a little bit in the last 20 to 30 years. What do you think of that?
Well, let's take your idea of a machine that's producing something. Doesn't matter what it's producing. You just said it's got to be taken care of. It's got to be maintained. So now you put a person, whether that person's in accounting, engineering, marketing, sales, that person needs to be maintained too. And it's interesting that sometimes people are motivated for doing the work they're doing, but sometimes they get bored. And if you track their engagement or satisfaction over time, you'll see the curve kind of goes up and then flattens off. Well, I know a couple of companies that actually track that. And when they see that engagement going off, they put them into a different job with a different division, a different manager. They just do that. And all of a sudden engagement goes back. It's just that, hey, I get bored. I don't want to do this, so they're constantly tracking. And sometimes they see that engagement going down. If the candidate's not a very good person to begin with, they say, okay, I think it's time for you to leave. But it's the same kind of thing. You got to maintain these things, and it's hard work. I mean, I'm 70, I'll be 79 next month. I sound pretty enthusiastic. That's because I've found this partner I can work with, which is AI. I mean, I just talk about, I even said, let's build a complete hiring system from scratch, what it will look like. And so it's amazing what AI can do, but at 79, that's the thing. Oh, this is a breakthrough. This is a game changer. But even I remember 2 years ago, HR wouldn't even think of using it. They wouldn't even think of can't do it. Now you must do it. But they're still using last year's stuff, not the current stuff. Just like I'm sure if Amazon has its way, I could have ordered the part and would have known that I wanted that part before I even ordered it. And it would have been here as soon as the part broke down. Now, that's not going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does happen.
Someday. Yeah. This is the whole thing is you when you look at technology, I'm one of these people that's real skeptical about some of the technology creating languidity or laziness in individuals. And, I worry about critical thinking not being a thing anymore because you can see it everywhere. And it's just really interesting when you put it that way, when the technology is advancing and it's used properly in an area where it can be effective, like as a tool for augmentation. I think that's an amazing use of technology. It's just like even when I talk about CMMS, I don't care which system you have, it's a tool. A hammer is only as good as the person swinging it, meaning to say that they know how to effectively use it and not bend a bunch of nails and create a bunch of waste and all that. So CMMS, AI, all these things are just like that. I want to switch you into what we call the fun question segment. These are a couple of questions.
I'll be the judge of that. So
Yeah. We'll find out. I think this will be kind of fun. No wrong answers here. This is just a great way to kind of wrap up our initial episode. So, what is your favorite music?
Well, I have to sadly to say it's probably 60s rock and roll. I mean, I still listen to that. My wife gets pissed off. And I go to jazz shows. We went to some jazz show out in Palm Springs last week, and Peter White was there, and it was great. And we go down to Newport Festival down in Laguna Beach or Newport Beach, and I enjoy it. But I still like the 60s and 70s rock and roll, so it's my thing.
Good.
Brings back nice old days.
Good. I like it. Next fun question is, what is your favorite sport or hobby? And on sport, it does not have to be one that you play. It could be one you like to root for.
Oh, I'd have to, and I truly love football, and I don't know why. I mean, it's brutal, but I love it, and I love basketball. And I went to UCLA when John Wooden was there, so I root for the Bruins, but boy, they're bad. Nonetheless, but I follow that, but. Just like I'll follow the Lakers, but if they're winning, I'll follow them. If not, I only like winners. But it would be the Lakers, and it would certainly be the Rams, and certainly would be the Bruins.
All right. Here's the big one on the fun question segment, and we're gonna do a little wrap up at the end. But this is the big one. No wrong answers here. What is your philosophy, perspective, or opinion, anything at all, on this concept of work-life balance?
Yeah, that's more philosophical question. I think when I ask people this question, I say, forget the money. Why do you want this job? I always do that as a recruiter. I said, forget the money. Why do you want it? If they can't describe why they want the job, it's a waste. I won't make the offer to them. So it's the same thing. If you say, why do I do what I do? I do this, me personally, because I really see what performance-based hiring is, which is my approach. AI can make it easy for everyone. Does that? And I wrote an article today is how could we, and I actually asked ChatGPT to write an article that says how a person could maximize their personal motivation. And I think if I had to, I don't even know what your question was, but the idea is I think that's a personal decision for everyone. And I think it changes over time. I think if someone doesn't get what they want out of work, they might get it out of charity work or coaching work or something else. And I see that, but people who are driven don't just glide along. They take their ability, their energy, their insight, their enthusiasm, and put it somewhere where it's valuable. So that's how I would say it. You've got to find something you have to do. Obviously, you need enough income to do what you want to do, but then that's up to you how you want to do it. And I said I made a lot of money early on, and once I made enough, money was an issue. I just kind of wanted to do these other things. So,
yeah, love it. No wrong answers. It's important stuff for somebody to hear. Somebody somewhere is going to hear it and go, wow, I like that. Another person is going to go, I don't know. I don't agree. Perfect. It's exactly what we want. Now, the other question I wanted to ask, this is not part of the fun questions. This is getting a little bit more back on track, but HR Moneyball, if somebody wants to check it out, wants to understand what that really is, where do they go? What do they do?
Yeah, if they go to performancebasedhiring.com, they'd find us. Performancebasedhiring.com, they'd find us, or just check Lou Adler on the internet, Lou Adler, performance-based hiring. They'd find all our stuff. I've been around a few years, so people can find me pretty easily.
At least a few. Well, I'll put some stuff in the episode for that. But Lou Adler, I want to thank you for being here with me on CMMS Radio.
Hey, it was great to be here, Greg. I appreciate it. I like talking manufacturing, so it's great stuff.
Thank you. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.